Good evening, everyone. Sorry I am late. We are going to dive right on in because we are already a couple minutes behind, which certainly should not be a problem. But before we dive into stand up like normal, want to dive into a couple reminders. So as you guys may have noticed, homework starts to get a little bit tougher as we get into the program, right? That New York Times assignment, not an easy assignment. And you know what? Neither is week 13 with the to-do list app. So just a reminder to everyone, lean into your one-on-ones, right? That is, or lean into Slack, shoot us messages, and a couple things. Frustration is common, right? Like that is a normal thing, a part of being a developer. I still feel frustration when I write code, right? There is no super easy way around that. And there will be times that you feel like you just wasted 30 minutes, right? And it's like, no, you didn't waste 30 minutes. You just spent 30 minutes finding out where the answer isn't, right? So that brings us closer to knowing where the answer is. So take a step back. Don't let yourself not knowing where you're stuck be an issue either. If you don't know where you're stuck, you got to take a step back and say, well, what am I trying to do? Whatever I'm trying to accomplish, that's where I'm stuck. That's how I can ask for help, right? So lean into that for when you ask for help on Slack, when you schedule a one-on-one, whatever it is, that's what you want to lean into. Techniques that kind of work for any development whenever you're stuck: rubber duck it, talk it out, say aloud, what am I trying to do? What isn't working, right? The act of verbalizing it, everyone around you may think you're crazy, but you know what? They probably think you're crazy already if you're still part of this program. So talk it out. The brain, when you verbalize it and it gets to your ears, sometimes that round trip loop is what gets the brain to unstick somewhere. That is a proven psychological method. It does work. Walk away for 15 minutes. If you're stuck on it and you've been stuck on it for the last half hour, you're going to be stuck on it, I can promise you, in the next 15 minutes, right? So walk away, come back to it, because you're going to see it in a whole new light. The brain does not work 8 hours a day at this level for coding. We need breaks. We need to say, all right, what's going on here? Let me just walk around the house for 15 minutes. I'm probably not drinking enough water. Let me go get a glass of water, right? Let me just zen out here. Let me not think about it. And 9 times out of 10, when you're not thinking about it, you think of the answer, right? So take your breaks there. When you do ask for help, if you're asking for help in Slack, I will show you guys how I post code. So if I switch over to the live stream channel, you notice that when I post code, it's nice and formatted in Slack. That does not come by default, right? So if I head into my VS Code and I don't know, I just grab some random CSS here. If I copy and paste that in, you can see that is kind of hard to read. And it's like, why is that hard to read? Well, we're so used to monospaced fonts in our code, it makes it harder to actually understand, hey, did I miss a colon there? Well, that colon is so freaking tiny right here, it's kind of hard to see it. So whenever we share code in Slack, what you should do is put 3 backticks at the beginning. There's backticks, the same character we use for the template literal. We also want to go to the end of our code and put 3 more backticks. While that won't change our formatting at all in the Slack editor, when we hit the enter button on that, you'll see that the message gets sent as monospace, right? So you guys have sent me code snippets before, and what I have to end up doing is copying them in Slack and just pasting them into VS Code. So I got the monospace font and can read that code a little easier. So if you're asking for help from me or from any of the TAs or any of the formal instructors, when you send a message in Slack, don't say hey and wait a couple hours for them to get back to you. Hey, here's my question. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Here's the code that I have already, right? Going to be a long message, but that allows us to quickly read through it and go, no, you need a one-on-one for that. You're missing a concept. Or we can say, semicolon, line 32, and you're like, and you're off to the races again. So when you ask for help, make sure you include the code. Make sure you format the code properly with those 3 backticks. Don't forget them at the end as well. You need 3 at the beginning and 3 at the end. And that will format your code properly for you. What else did I have for reminders? The link for one-on-ones is in Canvas. It's always has been in Canvas. I included it here, but just as a reminder for everyone, if you head to Canvas up at the top where you always join the Zoom classroom, a couple links down is this Calendly links. I'm going to actually rename that to say one-on-one Calendly links to make it even more obvious. But if you pop this open, this takes you not only to my Calendly, but Ryan just set his Calendly up this week. Nathan is in here, and then TAs as well, if you would like to schedule with any of them. This is the last time I will say it. I don't have it my Calendly open for next week. That does not mean I'm fully unavailable. If you do want to meet with me next week, shoot me a Slack message on Monday, and we will find a time that works for both of us. I'm pretty sure I'm smart enough to convert Pacific time to East Coast time. We will find a time that works for you guys. Okay. No office hours this week. I am not the Grinch. I am not holding office hours on Christmas. Sorry, I love y'all. I'm taking Christmas off. With that said, we will try and get back in the habit of doing office hours in person. So if anyone wants to get out of the house or wants to meet up on the Lemoyne campus, I will try to at least do in-person office hours at least once a month, if not every week. And based off of attendance, we can decide from there. And then final reminder, I didn't type in here, the week we are back is not in person. The following week is. That information is available in the schedule. And of course, I'll send you guys the room number towards the end of week 14, because week 15 will be in person. With all of that said, do we have any questions? What did we learn yesterday? What did we accomplish yesterday might be a better question, because we accomplished a lot.
We created multiple folders so we could make our code dry.
Yes, don't repeat yourself. Dry is a very important coding principle. We created new files and new components. What was that process called? Just refactoring our code, right? We are taking our code and drying it up is one method of refactoring. Anything that's making our code a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to understand, and a little bit more efficient, that's kind of all what goes into refactoring. And there very rarely are things that I write that don't need to be refactored, right? Our first attempt is always our messiest. But once we get it working, we can then take a step back and say, how can we clean this up? How can we do this better? And so that's why we spent the time doing it all in one file and moving it into separate files, because that's a normal part of writing code. So refactoring, moving things out to separate files, using different components, touching on import export a little bit. That is definitely all from yesterday. What else? Did anyone have a light bulb moment or have a moment that they got stuck? Okay, that's all right. We did a lot yesterday. Train was moving fast. We are going to be revisiting our code from yesterday. We're going to start adding in some functionality. Our main goal tonight is to say, all right, how do we make it so that when we send a message, it shows up, and even make it so when we send a message, we get a dummy response message in reply. So that's what we're going to be shooting for tonight. Then we take a couple steps away from chat app. We let React marinate over the next week or so. And when we come back, we've got 2 more weeks of React, of just building more projects, right? One thing I want to mention is hold off on getting started on your capstone in React. The reason I say that is while we have covered most of the React concepts that we need to learn, we don't have enough practice with them. And there's one concept we haven't covered and will cover when we get back. And that is something called routing. Right now, every React thing we've done has been all on one page. And you may have noticed that when we pull in other components, we don't just go to that HTML file, we all pull that into the app component. Well, there is a concept called routing that allows us to tie the route of the page, in other words, the URL at the top, into specific React components. When we come back, that will be one of the first concepts we cover for getting multiple pages working, how to pass data between them, all of that stuff. We're actually going to go back to, I think, blog when we get back. So that is a concept that's headed your way, but you may do more harm than good right now if you dive into trying to convert your capstone over. The good news is not only do we have another 2 weeks of React kicking off the new year with a good bang, week 16 is a project week. So we are off on the 16th for MLK Day. On the 17th, 18th, and 19th of January, those are all set up for capstone work, right? It's going to be open office hours. It's going to be a chance to catch up on your portfolio. It's going to be a chance to review things on your capstone. It's going to be a chance to get practice moving what you already have in HTML into React. So do not panic. The next capstone check-in isn't until January 23rd. So that project week gives everyone a breather to say, no new concepts here, no projects that are assigned for homework. Let me just take this in class time and narrow in on capstone. And everyone will be at a different stage in their capstone. That's okay. This next capstone check-in is all about practicing with React, moving our projects over to that. But again, don't spend time over this break getting a jump start on that unless you're feeling really good about React. If you're like, you know what, I'm not going to worry about multiple pages. I'm just going to dive in. I want to get started. That's okay. But my personal advice is to say, hold off on that because we've got a lot more React coming your way that you want to feel more confident before you start moving code over from whatever you've completed in your capstone so far. Okay, one last miscellaneous thing before we dive back into our chat application. I believe it was on Monday, we started exploring node modules, right? And we saw, hey, node modules is pretty big. It's like 250 meg. That's a quarter of a gigabyte. The Mac has this great feature, iCloud Drive, where files on your desktop and your documents can sync up to the cloud. The problem is that there are hundreds of thousands of files in node modules. And while iCloud is great at syncing up 1 or 2 documents, it is not great at syncing up 100,000 different files that are contained in node modules. That's what Git is for. And we will be bringing Git back. We're actually testing internally GitHub Classroom. which is going to be an easier way for you guys to turn in your assignments and also get more practice with Git. Because as our projects grow, we've got multiple files, they're getting harder to turn in on Canvas. They're actually hard for us to grade because we have to download each one of them. So GitHub Classroom is a way that we can submit assignments directly in there. We're still playing with that. We're not quite ready. We haven't switched over to that system yet. But going back to iCloud Drive, really, really bad at syncing our programming files. And up until this point hasn't been a problem, right? Because we've had our index.html, we had our style sheet, tiny files, they synced up fine. But almost universally, the file management and backup system used by professional developers is Git. And so that's why we want to start moving you guys over there. Plus, it will have the benefit of creating repositories that you can link to directly on your portfolio site. So that is coming down the pipeline. In the meantime, we want to turn off iCloud Drive sync in our My Code folder because it will cause problems. Last cohort, we had 2 students lose their entire My Code folder because they had iCloud Drive on. And we certainly do not want that. So we're going to take a very quick minute to go to everyone's favorite application, the terminal. And we are going to CD down into wherever your My Code folder is. So we're going to go CD to the desktop. I'm going to LS on that and see my folder is called C4 My Code. So I'm going to go to my C4 My Code. And I'm going to make sure I made it all the way down there with a PWD to make sure I'm in my My Code folder. I'm not in any particular week. I am only in my top level of my My Code folder. From there, we are going to touch a new file. Touch just creates a blank file for us. And we are going to type in a period, which makes this a hidden file, and say no sync, all one word together. When we hit enter on that, that just made a hidden file for us that has nothing in it, but that file name alone is enough to tell iCloud Drive, hands off, no syncing this folder. Everything else is fine to sync, not this one. Now, if you don't have iCloud Drive on, you don't have that set up, that's okay. Still create this file because you never know down the road when you are going to turn that on and when you're going to have that syncing. So that touch no sync, it's not going to return anything out, but as long as you've run that in your My Code folder, that's going to set you up for success and going to prevent iCloud Drive from causing you headaches down the line.
And we want that just on the C4 My Code. We don't have to go any further in, right?
You don't have to go any further in. Once it sees it in My Code, it will apply that no sync to everything inside the My Code folder. And if you happen to have programming files and node modules elsewhere on your computer, not in your My Code folder, it is worthwhile to set up a no sync in those folders as well.
Okay, sorry, next.
Mhm.
Where do we put the period? The
It's
dot?
touch space period no sync.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? There's a good meme here that I have to share with you guys. Sun, black holes, and node modules. Heaviest items in the universe. Okay. We are going to dive back into our code from yesterday. One second. Okay, we are going to go to Finder, I'm going to go to my desktop and to my code. We are going to let me see. Yep, we're going to duplicate day 4 just so that we follow along. If you would prefer not to duplicate it and want to just keep working in your day 3 folder on the chat app, that is totally fine with me. It is going to take a minute here so we can talk about our impending doom of sub-0 degree temperatures headed our way.
Yeah, not looking forward to it.
No,
Hoping I don't get stuck at work tomorrow.
I have a flight at 3 p.m. and I'm not worried about getting out of Syracuse. I'm worried about getting out of JFK and making sure that flight is on time. So we will see.
I almost went out and bought a generator. Like they're talking about this being such a horrible storm. I was like, I know nothing about generators, but I think I should go get one.
They are surprisingly noisy. And what people underestimate with generators is, well, the generator's got to be outside because it's burning gas. But then how do I get the cord inside?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. I've seen all kinds of weird get-ups for that.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to rename my D3 copy to my day 4. And then I'm going to open the chat app in VS Code. I don't want to open the day 4 folder itself. I'm going to drag and drop the chat app. I'm going to attempt to, okay, why do you hate me? There we go. To VS Code. You can also pop that open with a file open folder, just like normal. From there, I will start a live share. I am going to right click on my package.json and open an integrated terminal. And then I'm going to run my npm start. And we'll get some windows situated here. This is where we left off last night. And we are going to do a quick review, a quick run through of how all of this is working so far.
Hi guys, sorry I'm late, but
You didn't miss much. All we've done is copied day 3 into a day 4 folder and waited an eternity for it to finish copying. And then we popped open the chat folder inside of that in VS Code and did our npm start to get our React app running.
okay.
Everything
So-
else is just reminders that you can either catch in the recording, or I think I have most of them in the outline for tonight. We did do a step where we created something called a no-sync file, which will prevent issues with iCloud Drive down the line. So if you do use iCloud Drive, I would suggest going back to about 5:55 in the recording and just going through those steps.
Will do. Thank you.
Max, do you want to start the recording?
It is recording. Sorry, I was typing out a message for you and got distracted. It automatically starts at the beginning. I just forgot to switch it over to cut out the first couple minutes. Thank you for checking, though. There's one class of all last cohort that everyone was like, this is terrific. I'm finally getting it all. And then I forgot to record the entire first half of it. Only time I've ever done that in 4 cohorts.
That was almost Ryan's class. If it was a female.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's not a good feeling when you're like, oh man, that wasn't captured. All right, so we are going to do a quick review here, and this review is not only for your sake, this is what I do as a professional developer, right? This is when I come in, I clock out at 5 o'clock, I clock back in at 9 in the morning. I don't actually, but the metaphor is there. And I say, all right, let's review where we're at. What did we accomplish yesterday? This isn't just about remembering where we left off. This is about making sure that we're understanding what we did yesterday. The command in the terminal, you're going to right click on your package.json, open an integrated terminal, and then npm space start. Okay, so we're in our app.js. We broke everything out into 3 separate components. Our import up at the top here is doing the file system work for us, right? It's saying, hey, header message list and message input are all separate files, all separate JavaScript files over here. What we're doing is we're importing the components or the functional components from each one of them. So we pull in the header, the messages list, and the messages input. That is all in our app component. Well, to see what's actually inside all of them, I need to actually open up that header file. So here's a little pro tip for you. If you hold in command, it will make your file paths a hyperlink. So if you hold in command and actually click on any one of them, it will open that file up for you in a new tab. That's not really important when we only have a couple files over here and can just jump into them. But it is very helpful when we start getting into larger React projects. So in our header, this was a pretty basic component for us. We made a new component, which is just a new function for us. We made sure it had a capital letter because whenever we make our own component, we name it with a capital letter. We export it down here so that we can import it into our app. And then we return and switch over into our HTML mode, put all of this in here. We're good to go. My little header shows up here. Okay. We go back to our app.js. We got a little fancier in our messages list. Our messages list not only has the main component that we export down here, it also has 2 other components, sent message and receive message. And so far, these are pretty standard HTML things, except for the fact that we pass in the props. So in order to call this component, in order to call the function, we use the name of the function as another tag. And so VS Code is trying to help us out here. This is in that like sea green color because it knows, hey, that's our own component, right? And so that's why our div is in blue, but our component is in that greenish color. That is because it's recognizing that's a custom component. So we made 2 different components that could be reused. We leaned into the grid system and certainly had some fun in our CSS yesterday to get things styled out the way they were. But now we're in here. We pass in our text. This is a prop. This is the value of the prop. We pass that props into the function so we have access to whatever got sent in. And then down here, we use that props in order to get access to the text. We finish up with our message input. Our message input was just an input type text. We put some styling on that. We used our grid system. That got us going down here. And then the only real fun thing in app.css was our messages height, which was setting this in here to push down that send bar. Any questions about any of that? Did I shake anything loose that you would like me to go over again? Anything that you don't know how it's working? Any general questions?
I guess I just kind of have a general question about the props property, I guess. And if it's in too much in the weeds, let me know. Is it safe to say like that props parameter that we pass in, like once you pass it in, and like say in the instance we use text as like an actual prop, right? But is it okay to think of props as like an object and it has like it's attached to the key, which is whatever we put in? Does that make sense?
It is not only safe to think as props as an object, it is an object. And we can prove that because if we console log our props here and take a look at what we've got in the console, we see, hey, that's an object. And inside that object, there's our text. And in fact, we can get pretty fancy with our props. We can not only pass in text, we can pass in almost any data type that we want. So if we wanted to pass in my array, we could do that by saying 1, 2, 3. Well, now in our props down here, we've got my array with 1, 2, and 3 in it. So we can pass almost any data type in here. If it is a string, we don't need the curly braces because it's, standard HTML syntax. But if we are passing in any other data type, we put our curly braces in there. That's telling our JSX, heads up, we've got some JavaScript-y thing coming in our HTML. And then we are able to pass that in. I don't think it's in the weeds because there are actually two different ways of accessing props. We can use the props keyword right here, or we can use a more advanced, newer feature of JavaScript called object destructuring. And what that means is because we know that text and my array are the two props that are coming in here, instead of having to use props.text, we can what is called destructure the props object to include the text and my array. And then we can actually reference my array and the text directly without having to say props dot something. Basically, we're taking that props object and breaking that apart before we even get into our code. So this achieves the exact same thing. You'll see my receive message still shows up. You'll see I still have access to that array there. This is called object destructuring. And so you'll see React code use either one of them. I will say half of our components at work use destructuring. The other half of them just dive right into props. I do think that destructuring it is a little bit cleaner of an approach because you don't have props dot all over your code. But the flip side of that is it might be a little bit harder to understand. Well, what's text? Where is text coming from? When we say props.text and are a little bit more explicit, it's more clear that text is a prop. So it's up to you. It's total, whatever you want to do there. I will leave this one as destructured so that you get exposure to both styles. But that's definitely not an in the weeds question.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, you touched on a lot of what I was really trying to get at is like, if it's an object, can it be accessed like we would do an object and do things like that? So yeah,
It
thank you.
sure can be. Do we have any other questions? Or did I fully answer your question? Oh, you're muted.
You definitely,
you're good.
you definitely fully answered mine. I'm all
Okay.
good. Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Does anyone have code from yesterday that they need a little booster push to get caught up to where we're at? Okay. Remember, you don't need to know where you're stuck. You just need to know that you're stuck. So if anyone feels like they see mine and it's working and they see yours and it's not working, just raise your hand and figure it out together, right? This is sometimes you don't know what your question is, but you know you have a question. That's fine. We can figure out your question together and then get it resolved. Okay, we're going to dive in here. So I've got my chat app going on. Where's the starting point? Where do we start tonight? You're on mute. I don't know if you're talking to us.
In the function app.
In the
So-
app,
The return.
we
Do we
What do
set
you-
anything in? Do we make any state? Well, use state and return.
Yes. Why do we need to use state?
I would say maybe so we can access the message list and update it with our sent messages and received messages.
That's where we're going to start, right? We've got to keep track of all of our messages somewhere. But where I want to get started is I want to be able to type something in here, hit send, and have it appear up here, right? That seems pretty easy. Going to take us until break to get it to work, but that is okay. That is where we're going to start out. So I'm in my message input. I pop that open. I've got my input type text here. I'm going to move all of this into a form, and I will explain why in a second. In order to be able to send a message, what do I need to know?
Where to get the message. Yes.
What the message
Right.
is, what did they type in, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a type on this of submit. And then up on my form, I need to know they hit that send button, right? That's our starting point. I'm in here, I type in ABC, I click send. What happens? That's what I want to be able to hook into and control. So I'm going to say const form submitted equal to a new function. And then down here on my on submit, I'm going to add my form submitted. I'm tying the form submission to a function that I would like to run up here. Now, it's very common to see a button and say on click send message or on click form submitted. The reason why I don't like doing that is because an on click is literally going to make you type in your message, move your mouse over, and click on the send button. If we instead use a type submit and attach our event to an on submit instead of an on click, it will also let us type in a message and hit the enter key, because the enter key is wired up to fire off the submit event, when an on click will only work when you actually click on the button. That enter key won't work. So that's why whenever I do a button, I don't put an on click on it directly, if the point of that button is to submit the form, so that that enter key works when you type in a message, hit enter, it sends. Okay, first thing I notice, I come over here, I type in ABC, I hit send, and my whole page reloads. So we've known that, we've seen that, we know we get the event, and we event.prevent default. I save, I come over, I test, I type in ABC, I hit send, nothing happens. But that's good. Nothing is better than what it was doing before, which is refreshing, and we couldn't get access to that. Now, what concept do we use in React in order to get access to what was typed in?
Oh, shit.
I will
And
also
say, does it
accept
start with target?
no target. We actually need to keep track of what the user has typed in before the form even gets submitted. So where do we need to store the information as the user's typing it in?
In state.
In state. So we go up to the very tippy top of our file, because imports only work when they're like the first thing in the file. And we're going to import use state from React. We are then going to come in and say const message text and set message text is equal to a new use state. And it's going to start out as an empty string, because inputs don't like being null. They would much rather be an empty string than null. Okay. Now we're not using that anywhere. We've got to hitch that up to our input. Two things it takes. Right now, this is what we call an uncontrolled input. React doesn't have any control over what goes in that input, what happens when the input is updated. It is like the browser's got that input. I know nothing about it. Takes two things to move that from an uncontrolled input to a controlled input. The first thing we've got to do is add the value of message text to it. What we're doing is we're saying whatever gets stored in message text, that's what's supposed to show up on this input. The other thing we need to do is add an on change to say, hey, when that input gets typed into, go update the value in state. Now, so far, we've used a external function, right? We named a function up here and we link it down here. There is actually a shortcut to say, I want to make an inline anonymous function. Well, what does an anonymous function mean? It literally is just a function that isn't named. So this is not an anonymous function because the name of it is form submitted. Well, we can make a anonymous or inline function by putting it right in our JSX. And from there, we can say set message text to our event target value. Don't forget your event here. I missed that when I created my function. Now we could move this into its own name function up here and link it in, and that would still be fine. But this is just exposing a little bit more JSX syntax, right? This JSX syntax is showing you, hey, we can do more inline. We can get more of our JavaScript happening in our HTML if we want. Generally, you don't want to do any inline functions if it's going to take more than 2 or 3 lines of code, because it's just a little bit cleaner to have your JavaScript at the top and your HTML down at the bottom, but can be very handy to say, hey, I just need this quick thing to fire off. When it's a one-liner, it's totally fine to throw into an anonymous function. Okay, so I'm in here. I come over here. I type in ABC. Still working. If it is not working, you want to check your value and your on change. Because if we leave something like this on change out, you will see I can't type anything in there. Well, React is controlling the value, and because we have not updated that value in state, it is not going to let me type. That is such a common mistake that React will actually yell at you down in your console and say, warning, you provided a value without an on change. This will render a read-only field. Okay, so I'm going to put my on change back. I don't want to turn that off. Can type everything in. Now I go back up here and I go, all right, well, when my form is submitted, I have access to this message text that was in state. So to prove that, I'm going to console log my message text. Come over here. I got my ABC. I hit the send button and I get ABC coming out down here. And I can try that again. I can say 1, 2, 3, and I get that coming out as well. I'm going to quickly pause there for poll and questions.
Yeah, how do I pull up my other page or the page to see it if I've exited out?
If it's still running in your terminal, you can just open a new tab in Chrome and go to localhost :3000. If localhost :3000 says failed to connect, you probably need to reopen your terminal with an npm start.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh, you have a message input. Mm-hmm.
Give everyone just one more minute. You need any help, let us know.
Mine is not posting.
It won't show up at the top here. It will just show up in the console so far. Is yours showing up in the console?
Sorry. This laptop screen is so small. I don't see it.
And you typed in a message and hit the send button.
Hold on. Trying to make this screen bigger so I could actually work with it, because. Come on. Okay, now it's showing up.
Cool. That's our next step, is to make it work up here. All right, moving on. Last call for questions.
I'm getting this humongous error.
Share your screen.
So this is my code. I mean, it works, but then when I go to the console, it's this.
Okay, so message text is not defined, and it's saying line 13 in message input. So let's go look at line 13 in message input. And I think that's an old error, because your message text is defined on line 4 properly. So what we're going to do is go back to your browser and refresh the whole page. That clears your console, and now try and type a message and hit send. And you're good to go. So that was just an old error. Just clearing out the console will fix it.
Thank you.
No problem. Good lesson for everyone to learn. Last call. Questions going once, going twice. All right, moving on. All right, so we've typed in our message, we've hit send. Now the next logical thing is we've got access to the message now, or what got typed in. We need to make it show up here. But in order to make this show up here, we've got to say, wait a second. We've got our messages, and they're kind of hard coded in here, right? Sent 1, my receive message, sent 2. I kind of would like to make it so that when a new message gets updated in the messages list, just automatically shows up for me. Okay. Well, if we needed state to get access to when a user types something in here, we probably want to store our messages in state as well. If we do that, every time a new message comes in, it will automatically show it in my messages list. So we've got to kind of put that feature on pause. We've got to say, hold up, I'm trying to send a message. I can't make that message show up unless I'm storing my data of all of messages in the right spot. So I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to go into my messages list, and I'm going to say, all right, this is what's controlling when my messages show up or not. So I know I'm going to need state. I'm going to say, I'm going to import my use state. And I'm going to say const messages and set messages is equal to a use state. And we want to think through our data structure a little bit here. Put on our computer science hats for a minute. What kind of data type should we use to store our messages?
String.
Well, a string is great to store one message,
Oh, no,
I was gonna say,
but we need to store multiple messages. So what do we need?
Array.
An
array,
array. Okay, now we want to put in a couple dummy messages. So if I put in my sent 1 and my sent number 2 and my received, I need to now modify my code down here to make these show up. How do we loop over an item to generate out a component in React?
Dot map.
.map. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say messages.map, and I'm going to get access to each individual message. And I want to return. What do I want to return?
Maybe a span or whatever. What did we use for the previous messages?
That's all right
Uh,
here. Sent message, received message. Well, how do I know if this message was sent or received? And for that matter, how am I going to figure out this date thing that shows up underneath it? That pesky string is turning into more of a string, isn't or more than a string, isn't it? How should we store our messages in state inside the array? String ain't gonna cut it because we need more information associated with that message. So what should we use instead?
I still vote.
Objects.
What's that, Jennifer?
I'm still voting for an object.
Okay, you are right. We are going to store every message as its own object. That is going to have the text of the message. It's going to have the timestamp of when it was sent. And it's also going to keep track of whether it was sent or received. So we're going to say that, and then we take that whole thing and reuse that for our sent to. And then for our received message, we're going to use one more object. And this is going to be my received one. And this is going to be sent false because it was a received message. And I'm even going to spell received right before someone tells me it was spelled wrong. Okay, so I've got my map going on here. And I know that these are the components that make all of that show up. Now I can come in here and I'm like, wait, I'm getting each message, right? If I console log out my message, I'm getting each one of the objects that we started our messages out as up here. Okay, that's good. I need to make them show up, but now we run into a little sticky point. We can know whether or not the message was sent or received based off of this sent true. What we can do, this is just JavaScript. So if that's just JavaScript, we can say if the message was sent, then return. And now we break some barriers down and switch to our HTML and say return our sent message component with the text from the message.text. Else, if it wasn't sent, it must be a received. So return out the received message with the text prop still coming from the message.text. And we come over and I've got sent 1, sent 2, received, sent number 1, my received message, sent number 2. Okay, maybe that's a little overkill. I'm going to take out these old dummy components. And now I'm going to just flip these two for looks. We got our sent 1, our received, and our sent 2. pausing there. Giving you guys a breather to catch up if you need it.
What were the dummy components that you just got rid of?
They were what we had in there before we wrote our map.
Mhm.
So we don't need those anymore because our map is loading the data from the array, and our array has all that dummy messages in it, or starter messages. Anyone need help understanding the flow? We're thinking, all right, as developers, we need, access to the messages. It makes sense to put it all in an array. We start using a data type and we're like, nope, we need more information about that. So we put it in an object. Then we make sure our object is being properly passed down into our components. We map over it. And if you come over here, we've got this pesky, each list should have its own unique key prop. No, stupid thing. Whenever we map over and make new components, we've got to put a key on them. In the past, we've used index, but can anyone think back to a previous project where we generated an ID using something else?
I believe it was like a timestamp or
It
something like that.
was. We used a I forget what it is. JS date to milliseconds. That's what I wanted. Get time. Let's see if that works. So I'm going to say console.log message dot timestamp dot get time. That gives me the time that that message was created. So we're going to take that and we're going to put a key on both the sent message and on the received message of our message timestamp get time. We've got another error over here that's going to go away in a second, so don't worry about that. It's just mad that these messages all have the same timestamps on them. And it's like, well, now your keys aren't unique. That's okay. We'll solve that in a second. Okay, so we added our keys. React is mostly happy with us. Now I'm like, wait, what was I doing? I totally ADHD'd. I saw a squirrel. Okay, where are we at? We've got our messages working. And we go back to our message input and we go, oh, right. This form was submitted. And we've got the message text right here. And we're trying to get a new message into our messages list, and that's over here. Oh, crap. How do we get access to our messages and our set messages from messages list when we need to add a new message to it from message input. Huh. This is what we need state hoisting for. We need access to the state that is in our messages list over in our message input. So this is like two siblings duking it out, and the parent comes in and says, stop it, give it to me, and I will split it evenly between you two. That's what we need to do here. We're going to take our messages list, and I'm going to try and do this in a split screen so it's a little bit easier to follow. No promises. I'm going to take my messages list in my use state. I'm going to cut that and move that over to my app.js. I also need to take my use state and bring that over to my import list. So I took this whole block of code that was in messages list and moved it to app.js. Okay. Now we go back over and React is mad. It's like, in messages list, I don't know what messages is. You told me to loop over messages, and I don't know where messages are. How do we pass variables or more information into our component? What React concept do we use?
Prop.
Props. So we're going to go to our messages list. And we're going to say, messages list, stop freaking out. Your messages are coming in via a prop. And we're going to go over to our messages list, and we're going to tell it at the child level, hey, your messages are coming in via a prop. Okay, I'm pausing there because this is a really important concept. All of this state we took from our messages list and moved it into our app.js. That is called hoisting your state, because you're taking it from a lower level component, messages list, and hoisting it up into the parent component, app.js. So we essentially took it from inside our messages list here and moved it up into our app here. Because we now have access to this here, we can then take the messages and send it back in via a prop called messages and get access to it back where we needed it in the list. Okay, so we're kind of back to where we left off, right? We've got our sent messages over here are received, but what we can now do is say, hey, message input, you need access to not only what the current messages are, you would also like to be able to set your messages as well. So we're going to give you two props. We're going to give you the messages, but we're also going to give you access to set the messages. Well, just like we had to tell messages list that it was receiving a new prop, we also need to tell message input, hey, you are going to get two props. And when that form is submitted, I want you to use props.setMessages to set the messages to whatever is in the current messages array, which also comes in via a prop, along with a new message with the text coming from our message text, the timestamp being a new date, and finally, that this is not a sent message, it's a received, no, sorry, it is a sent message, so that goes to true. Holy Batman, that was a lot of stuff. I'm gonna pause here. We're gonna take a breather. Rewind back to our last break. Our last break, we had our messages list and it was using state in here. And we thought we were doing something good. We moved it all into state. We can update our messages. We're great. The problem that we ran into was our state was down here in messages list. Our state was inside of here. And our message input needed access to the list that was hanging out in here. So we stole the state out of messages list and moved it up into our app. Now, because we made that move, messages list is mad at us. It's like, yo, dude, you took that from me. I need to know what the messages are. So we add in a prop here to send those messages in. Now that we're sending those messages in, we tell messages list, hey, you're getting a prop called messages. Use that prop data to generate out the list of everything. Okay, now we've unbroken it. We've gotten it to a state that React is happy with. But what was the whole point of moving this up to the app? Now we can tell our message input, you're receiving two props. You're not only going to receive a function called set messages that's going to allow you to update the messages. You're also going to get the same prop your other sibling is getting, the list of all the current messages. Okay, well, whenever we add a new prop, we send more information in, we've got to tell message input, hey, you're going to get some props. So last level of understanding here, now that it's getting the props, I have access to set messages. Where's my set messages coming from? It's coming in from my props, which is coming in from my props up here, which lines up with my props right here. And those props are coming in from set message, which is linking it to use state from React. Do that in reverse. In app.js, we pull in use state from React. We then tell it to use state. That's a special variable that's automatically going to update the screen for the user. And we get access to two pieces of information. Messages, the array that holds all the items, and a set function so that we can update the array or the value in state to include new information. That's up at our app level. We need to get our message input access to messages and set messages. We do that by sending messages and set message into a prop. These props, messages and set messages, are accessible in the props that we send in here. Now that those props are sent in there, when we have the form submitted, we are able to set our messages from the props, coming from the set messages, coming from our use state up at the app level, to set in a copy of all of our current messages, along with a new object that includes the message text from the state in this component. An advanced concept. You use this all the time because you think a component just can manage its own state. And then you go, ooh, turns out another component needs access to that state as well. So just like we had to refactor our code yesterday, we have to hoist our state. We're taking our state that was happily living in the messages list into our app itself, and then doling that out back to the children components. That means that when I go over to my browser and I type ABC and hit send, I get my ABC message. How? Because the form submit runs, it goes up and it says, I need to get set messages from my props. My props has set messages that is tied to my state up in app. So what we're basically doing is from this child component message input, we're asking it to update the messages up in the parent state. Then, because this state has gotten updated, messages list goes, whoa, messages has a new message in it. So map over the messages, determine whether or not it's a sent message or a received message, then show that message text. We're just going to take 2 minutes to let that resonate, explore your files, make sure you're understanding it. It's an advanced concept, but it's a really, really important one. All right, talk to me. Where are we at? Getting it?
No, but like, question. Can I think of it like a parent and child thing? So do you have to create multiple, if you had like multiple, what's it called? Components. Would you have to create multiple parents as well? Or can you like reuse one parent to like make the component work?
Don't know that you're using parent and child in the right
Probably
context
not.
there. So think about it like this. App is the parent component. App has two children. It has messages list and messages input. What the parent is doing is it's giving its children access to the state that exists at the parent level. So in order for the children, messages list and message input, to have access to the state that is in the parent level, we pass that in as a prop. Because of that, when we call that props.set messages, what we're really doing is tracing through the props to get access to the set messages, which is coming from the parent's set message state. So what we're doing is this state only exists in app.js, but we're allowing the children to not only get access to the values inside of the state, but also to get access to set new values into the state.
But it's like, in this example, at least, it's almost like you had to make the children first before you could know like which one of their like state to pass up to the app, right?
Yes. And that's a very common thing, right? If we make a component and we think, all right, this is the state messages list. It makes sense that the messages list component keeps track of the list of all the messages. But we had that pesky little message input that said, I want to add to the messages list too. We were like, well, you can, it's over in messages list. So we can't just say message input, go up to messages list and steal access to it. We can't go across the sibling relationship. Instead, the messages list component had to give it up to the app level, and then the app level was allowed to send it back in to not only message list, but also to the message input.
So like even if the message list component and the message input component, say they were in the same like file, they still wouldn't be able to access each other's like state. If like one had the other state, like it would have to be passed up through the app at that point for all of them
Through
to
the
get it.
parent. Yes.
Okay.
Doesn't necessarily have to be passed up through the app. It doesn't need to be passed up through their parent. In this case, app is their parent. But when we get into more
So-
complex React
all right.
apps, there will be more
All right.
levels of components.
So say like, for instance, using the previous example, say message input was inside message list for whatever reason.
Sure.
In that case, they could be hoisted up.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so state is scoped not by file, but by component. So in messages list, if we had some state in messages list and received message needed that for whatever reason, we would have to pass in the state into the received message. Right? If we said something up here, we can't use myvar down here, even though it's in the same file, because this is its own function. Regular JavaScript rules apply. You can't access a variable inside a function outside of that. So what we would have to do is pass that in to say myvar equals myvar, and now we could get access to myvar in here.
And just to be clear, like that's, you just destructured the props object to like those variables. So
You got
those are basically props.text and props.myvar. Okay.
That might actually come back to bite us. We might be using that example in a minute. Okay, so we've got our messages sending. I come over here, I can send it. I want one more thing to get done. When I send a message, I want the other message, I want this to clear out, right? Looking at our message input, what could we do to make it to say when we hit the send button, clear whatever the message input is?
Maybe set message text to a blank string.
All it takes.
You said dot delete before?
I don't know any function of dot delete.
I remember using a delete function in one of the other, I don't know if it was
There is,
exactly, but there was.
there's a delete operator you could use on objects. You're right, Alva. We did it in free code camp. There's like some delete like operator that you can use on objects, I believe.
There is, if you've got, now I know what you're talking about. If you've got like a const my obj that equals like a is equal to 1 and b is equal to 2, you can delete my obj dot a, and that will remove this value inside the object and leave this one in it. But we don't really want to delete because the message text that we have is stored in text in state. So all we do is we set it back to an empty string. And because of that, now when I type in 1, 2, 3 and hit send, it clears out for me. Brandon, go ahead.
It says I have an error going on. I'm not sure what happened.
Share screen, take a look. It cannot resolve React semicolon. So let's go up to app.js and look at line 4 compared to line 5. I think I'm joking when I say, you just missed the semicolon. It happens. Okay.
I was panicking for a sec. All right, thank you.
No problem. We are right at break time, so let's take a break. Be back at 7:25. And I'll stick around for a minute in case anyone needs help.
Just a quick question. Should we still be receiving that warning about the key, the time? Okay, cool.
Yep, we'll fix that in a second.
Thanks.
Hey, Max, can we comment some of this?
We will we'll probably stop at 8 o'clock for any new features and just go through and comment the whole thing together as a class.
Yeah, that would be great because it's just all like a giant hairball.
Yep, totally fine. Yeah, we can definitely go through and comment together.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Max.
Mhm.
Real quick, can you just look at my terminal messages and my VS Code? Thank you. Is that stuff supposed to be in there?
That no. Go to your messages list.
Okay.
And we took out messages and set messages because that should be up in your app file now.
So
So
take out.
check your app file. Yeah, see how we've got all of that up at the app level now?
Right here.
Yes.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is go into messages list and delete out 4 through 8. And now React is going to get cranky with us and is like, well, what is messages? Where do I get the messages from? So what we do is we give our messages list. Can you give me access?
All right.
Thank you. We tell our messages list, heads up, your parent, where you're called, is sending in the messages via a prop. So when we go down to the child level, we tell it, heads up, you're going to get messages as a prop.
Okay.
Basically, we're telling it, hey, up at the top, the parent is now responsible for keeping track of the state, and messages list gets access to the messages down at the messages list level, we tell it heads up, you're going to get a prop called messages, and that's what you can use to map over everything.
Okay.
So now, if we're in good shape, we should be able to type in a message and hit send and have it show up here.
Ah, okay.
So we're just tracing this through. We're saying, hey, at the input, go set the messages that is coming in from right here and getting passed in via a prop to our message input. Our message input is taking all the current messages and adding in a new message, which is going back up to our app level and updating it here. But now that it's updated in the parent, the child goes, whoa, messages has changed. I need to now go into messages list and go make that new message show up.
When you say it out loud, it definitely makes sense.
We are going to stop a little earlier tonight on adding new features, and we're going to go through and comment out line by line, numbered out what order all of this happens in.
Okay. And I can ignore the rest of the messages in terminal now?
Yep, you're fine.
All right.
I think the only issue is we just have to take out this import because we don't use it anymore, and now you're cleared out and good to go.
Ah, okay. Thank you, Max.
No problem. All right, I'm going to take a break. I'll see you guys at 7:25. We left off. So we hoisted our state up. I want to just do a little cleanup, maybe get our timestamp working. And then we're going to try and stop adding new features and new code a little bit earlier tonight so we can focus in on understanding, right? Going through step by step, adding our numbers in there, doing all of that kind of stuff. So I don't love that we've got our starter messages in here, right? This is kind of just a placeholder to make sure everything's working. We've reached the point where we don't need them anymore because we can actually send a message. So I'm just going to comment these out because we don't need them. And when I do that, if I refresh in my browser, that error message is going to go away. That error message was in there because we were using a key that was reused across multiple messages, right? That date was the same date on all of them, and that was causing problems. So now when I send a message, it's going to show up over here. But what I would like it to do is have it show up a message in response. If I send a message, I want the computer to reply back to me. In order to pull that off, we're going to go to our form submitted, which is already having access to our set messages, and we're going to set out a set timeout. We're going to say you are going to wait 3 seconds after a message is sent, and once it is sent, add in a new set message with the message text of computer say what, and sent is going to be false. So we did our set timeout. We said wait 3 seconds, and then we borrowed our entire set messages up here and modified the text that gets sent in. So I save that. I come over here. I refresh. I type in ABC and hit send. I wait 3 seconds and I get, ooh. It erased my other message. Interesting. I did not expect that to be a problem. Let me see if I can solve that. Okay, we're going to refactor this code a little bit. Because what's happening here is the props.messages are not getting updated from this set messages. In other words, what's happening is when we send our message, we get ABC, and 3 seconds later, we get the computer overwriting that first message that we sent. What's happening is the set messages is running, but when this second set messages runs, it does not include the updated new message that we put into it. So I could get a little hacky. I could copy this and paste it down into here. And so now if we do ABC and send and wait 3 seconds, we get the response message, but we're running into some issues because the dates are now the same, and this is really not dry code, right? We're updating messages, we're waiting 3 seconds, and then updating messages again with the same message. I don't like it. So we're going to try and clean this up a little bit. I'm going to say, let current messages equal a spread of my props.messages. Now that we've made a copy of that, I can say, hey, props, I can actually say current messages, push in a new message. What do we want to push in there? We want to push in the new message that got sent. From there, I can set my messages to my current messages. What that also allows us to do is to come down here in our set timeout and also say, hey, we're going to go to our current messages. We're going to push in the computer generated message and then set messages again to include that message. Okay, just pause there. I don't know if this is going to work. ABC send 1, 2, 3. 3.5, 4, 4. Current messages, push it, set it. Console.log are current messages. Let's see what's in there. ABC, we wait 3 seconds. We look in the console. It does have it in there. Why is that not running?
We declared set timeout.
Set timeout is a function built into JavaScript itself. So it's
Okay.
kind of like const or let. You don't need to define it. It just
Okay.
knows that's kind of built in. It's like document or window, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I'm totally gonna cheat and see how I did this before. Because that should theoretically be working, and I would bet if we send another message, that other one is gonna pop up, which is kind of interesting. It's keeping a copy of it and then not triggering the re-render of the messages list. That's not what I wanted. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna check. Maybe I didn't actually solve for that. All right, this might be one that I'm gonna just come back to maybe after the break. I am a little confused as to why that's not working. Basically, what we're running into is this set messages is supposed to be the magic state of React, right? It's supposed to be that when you update your messages, the HTML automatically knows to re-render, come in here, check to see if the message is sent, and make it show up. What we're running into, though, is while all of that magic is working perfectly fine here, what it isn't doing is showing this message that got added in. Our set messages is updating to our current messages, but it's not triggering the re-render to make that message actually show up. And I believe it has something to do with the set timeout. Set timeouts are a little weird in that they evaluate at runtime. And I think there is something wrong. Basically, what my theory is the set timeout is clashing with the set messages, and that it doesn't want to do a state update in something that is delayed. I think that's the problem that we're running into, but I'm gonna have to come back on this one because I might need to do I might need to use a fancier function in React, some other hook like a memo or a
what
callback.
out of curiosity, like what role would like maybe like a set interval like play in this? Would that have a similar function or?
Same problem. Yeah. A set interval would say, hey, keep on adding a new message every 5 seconds. But set interval and set timeout are like sister functions. They use that same general notion of, hey, have a copy of this so that when you go and actually run it, you've got that variable saved. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have updating state in set. Well, set interval came up right away. So I will play with this and get back to you guys as to why that's not working. For now, we're just going to yeah, there's something with closures that's causing the issue. So for now, we're just going to disable this because everything else is working fine. And hopefully I will have an answer for you guys on Tuesday when we get back from break of how we can make the computer look like we're automatically responding to a message. Yeah, we'll do that. Actually, I think that's going to be a good example for a use effect. So let me develop some more content on that and I will get back to you guys on it. Okay, so we've got our thing sending. There's one more thing that I want to do. This is 12/21. Well, today's clearly the 22nd. What's going on there? Well, if I go to my messages list, I can always throw a console log in to see my props because my props are just another array or object or variable. So I come over here, I can pop this open, and I can see my sent, my text, and this lovely timestamp. Where is this timestamp coming from? How does it know it's December 22nd? We actually thought ahead and put a timestamp in when we added our new message. We included what time that message was sent. Okay, well, that's pretty cool, but it's not showing up here. Why not?
Does it need to be hoisted?
Does not need to be hoisted because when we console log out the messages, we can actually see the timestamp is accessible from that messages list file.
Does the timestamp also have to be in message input?
Ooh, message input is actually generating the timestamp, but
Last name timestamp that has that stamp on it already
what
in the span.
in
I
the
mean,
span?
after the span, the div class name timestamp 12/21/643.
Little sucker, we hard coded that last night. Okay, well, I can't just say message.timestamp, because if we go up and we look at what's getting passed down here, we only have access to the text. So we're going to solve this two different ways, both of which are going to use props. The first way on our set messages is we're going to add another prop called timestamp, and we're going to pass in the message.timestamp. We're then going to go down to our set message and say, hey, props is here, so we can add in the props.timestamp. I save that, I come over here, and everything's fine. I send a message, and everything goes white. Where did everything go? I'm going to check in my console, and it says objects are not valid as a React child. Well, that's kind of weird. What's it mean by that? I'm going to console log my props here to see what's coming in. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type ABC. It all crashes like before. But if I go up, I can actually see the object of my props and this timestamp. Okay, well, if that's a timestamp, wait a second. That's got a little arrow on it. That means that it's not a string. ABC is a string. This timestamp is a date object. We have to convert that date object into a string. We can pull that out with dot to locale. I thought I had it. Date to locale date. That's Java, not JavaScript. Come on, Google, you know better. To string will do it, but it's going to give me it in this format. I don't really love that showing up for all of my messages. So I'm going to see if we have any other options. To locale string. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so let's try that function. I come over, I send a message, I hit ABC, and now I get a much friendlier date showing up there. And it is currently 7:43. So that's showing up properly, and we can even test that by sending another message and having it show up at that time as well. Okay, that's cool and all, but I forgot about our received messages. If I comment that in just so we can see what a received message looks like, that date is still hard-coded. I need to fix that. So before we used props, but it's kind of laborious to pass in every single piece of information from the message that I'm looking for. What if instead of sending in the message text and the timestamp and whatever other information we need from it, what if we just send in the whole message? If we send in the whole message, that means that down here in our received message, we're going to receive the prop called message. And then inside of here, we can say message.text and message.timestamp.to locale string. And now when we come over, we got our time working, and we can say A, B, C, and send that and get that working as well. Okay, so take a step back there. Two different ways of solving this. Up here, where we call our components, we've got access to the message. We want the component to show the proper timestamp. So in the first way, in sent message, we added two new props, one called text and one called timestamp. We extracted that information out from the object, which was coming from the loop. Then we went down to our sent message and said, hey, not only should you use props.text, you should also use the timestamp. But if we keep on adding more and more properties to our message, we're going to have to keep on adding more and more props up here to pass that information in to the component. Instead, what we did in our second approach was we still have a prop called message, but this is the object. This has the timestamp and the text and whatever other properties are on our message. So what we can do is we tell our receive message, heads up, you're going to receive a prop called message. And then because message is an object, we can pull out things like .text and timestamp from that message. All right. That's all I got for you guys. Go through and we're going to go through a numbering exercise and start commenting all of this out. Gonna be a lot of comments. Before we start that, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I have a lot of errors and I've missed a lot of code. So can we take a few minutes to
Yes, we most
to
certainly
catch
can.
up?
The good news is most of our changes are all in messages list, I believe, and I guess and in message input. I'll try and leave both of those up on my screen.
Do you think you can help me? Sorry, there's like so many error messages and I can't even begin to know where I'm lost at.
Go ahead, share screen, take a look. Okay, so we're starting on
Messages list.
messages list, and it's saying 22 right here, props is not defined. Okay, well, we're not sending in props.text. Let's look at what we're sending in. We're sending in, whoa.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. We need to modify our received message because our received message, instead of passing in every individual property like we do in sent, we're going to pass in the whole kit and caboodle. We're going to pass in the whole message.
Okay.
Now we can use that message right here to say, go get the message.text and the message.timestamp.
Okay.
Now in messages list, line 9, it is mad that messages list, line 9, oh, timestamp is not defined here. Where does our timestamp come from? It comes from the message itself.
Okay.
Now it is also mad about
Current message.
message input, current messages here. Because we don't have current messages, we have current messages. Okay, now we're down to, I think, just warnings. form submitted is assigned a value, but never used. Well, I'm using it right here. What you talking about, Willis? We're missing a closing curly brace here. This wasn't closed out, so I think we have 2 extra ones here. Our function, we want to make sure our function is done, and then we return out the form.
Okay,
I think when you commented this out, that's when we lost that extra curly that we needed.
gotcha.
Now unexpected white space after spread operator. It literally just is picky about a space there. And then use state is defined and never used. That's because we were using state in here, but we moved the state up to the app level. So that's just a warning that won't break your code, but
Okay.
taking that out now gets you to compiled successfully. So now go test in your browser and see if that fixes anything.
Yep.
You're all set. Good to go.
Thank you.
No problem. Anyone else need another minute, or are we ready to comment some code?
I need another minute, Max. I'm trying to like fix what I can before I tell you it's broken.
Sure.
Same
Thank
here.
you.
Everyone until 7:55. Then I can give you a little speed boost if you need it, and then we will start commenting out some code.
Hey Max, but I think I'm gonna need some help again.
Share your screen. Let's take a look. Okay, we've got our app started up. I see an unsaved message input. Let's save that before we get too far. Okay, now in our browser, let's switch back over to that and refresh. And we have a very minimalist looking app, a little too minimalist for me.
Yeah, I don't know what
Figure
happened. Like,
out
it's
why we
weird
got a
how
white screen.
break.
So app, you're pulling in your messages list. Your messages. I don't. Oh, here. We've got you tried to define messages list inside of your app.
Oh,
This is supposed to be in here, and it is, but now you've got two of them.
they're conflicting.
So we got some cleanup to do. Messages list shouldn't be here. Messages list shouldn't be anywhere in app other than importing it from the file and using it down here. So we're going to take this out. I think what happened is you copied and pasted the state from messages list and took this line with it by accident.
Okay.
So we're going to save that and we're going to take one of these out. And now we're back to something. That's good. Now in our messages list, we don't want two of these. We just want one. And now we've got our messages back.
Okay.
So all of this is good. Now, if I say ABC and hit send, that shows up. So that's good. The last thing we did, second to last thing we did, I commented these two out because now we're sending our own messages. And then in our messages list, we use two different methods to send in information. In the received message, we sent the whole message in. That means we update this to say props.message.text and props.message.timestamp to locale string. That makes our time show up properly.
Okay.
The other way we did it is we modified our sent message to, instead of just passing in text, to also pass in the timestamp from the message.timestamp. And then we tell our props, hey, use the props.timestamp.to locale string. That makes it so when we send a message here, we get our ABC and our proper timestamp. And now
Okay.
you are all caught up.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, Max, I guess it's my time. Just so we
Go
can.
for it.
All right. Share my screen. Let's show. All right, this is my input. It seems to be giving me the most trouble.
All right, so
Can't
I'm
figure it out.
gonna request remote access,
Okay.
and it is mad on message input line 9 that current messages you're trying to push into it. Well, you're like, well, yeah, of course I am. And what do you mean it's not defined? It's defined right here. What's that comma doing in there?
Son of a biscuit. All right. All right. All right. Oh, you just fixed. I'm sorry. Ah.
All right, now we come over here and I type ABC and I hit send and you're good to go. And it's the current date and all of that. And then if we want to take it one step further, we can put our received message back in just as a starter message and see this is yesterday's date. So we're going to go to our messages list and we're going to see here you passed in the text and the timestamp. Here, we're passing in just the message. So if we go down to our received message, our message is already pulling out the text. That's cool, but it's not pulling out the timestamp. So from here, we can say message.timestamp, and then timestamp's an object, right? So we've got to call that toLocale string to format that timestamp for us. So now when we send a message, we get the correct time on both of them.
Thank you, Max.
No problem. All right, we're going to dive in. We're going to go through this in the order that the app loads, the order that the user types in a message, the order that the user hits the send button, and the order that it takes to make that message show up in the message list. So we start when the app first loads. What's it going to do? It's going to come in here. We're going to not dive into imports, right? We're going to just assume the imports are all part of what we're commenting out. So up here, the very first thing it hits in the app.js is number 1. Creates array of messages stored in state. That gives us access to messages and set messages, and we need to do stuff with that. But for right now, we're saying the very first thing this app does is it sets up our messages to store. That's kind of good, right? We're making a messages app. It makes sense that we need to store our messages somewhere. Then it comes down and it says number 2. You show HTML in header component. Well, where's that HTML? That lives in here. So this is technically number 3, but I'm going to try and keep the numbering low, right? So all it's doing is it's sucking in all of our HTML from here. Okay, number 3 is not only is it going to show messages list, it is also going to pass the array of messages via a prop. In other words, we're still just like our HTML, we're still going to go into messages list, but we're going to pass in the array of messages from state. So I go to my messages list, and now I need to say number 4. I don't know, I can't count. Number 4. We are going to loop over all the messages passed in from the app state via a prop. In other words, we're saying go over each one of the messages. Then we are going to say number 5, determine if the message was sent or received. And from there, we are going to say and render the appropriate component. So we're going to do a little fork there. We're going to say number 6A is going to be receive the info about the message via an object. And then we're going to say number 7 is going to be show the text and formatted timestamp in of the message. That's if the message is received. If it's a sent message, we're going to come down to number 6B here. In other words, it's another version of this. And we're going to say receive 2 props from the parent, which is messages list, called text and timestamp. And then 7B is the same thing. Show the text and the formatted timestamp. And this is going to happen every time there's a new message. So if there are 4 messages in here, because we are looping over all of the messages, everything from 5 all the way down to 7 is going to repeat. So I'll put a note in here. Repeat number 5 through 7 until all the messages are displayed. Pause me at any time if we're not following along, or you thought about it differently, or we're all still aboard. Did I rock the boat too hard here? Are we feeling
No, it's just a little too fast.
okay?
Sorry.
It might be helpful to, in your code, just put the number. And then when you go back over it, put it in
Yeah.
your own words.
Okay.
Because this is the way I understand it. And you may understand it because I explained it, but that doesn't mean that that's how you would write it out or say it yourself. Right. So I think it's important to put in the numbers so you can follow it through, but I would say wait and do it in your own words. And I will share a copy of all of this code, so if you need to reference it, you can. Okay. So we're like, all right, where do we go here? Well, what got us into this? What got us into this was messages list. So we're done handling messages list. I need to figure out 7 was our last number, right? So we're going to come in here and we're going to say number 8 is going to show input and send button along with 2 props of the current messages and a function to update that. This state up here, number 1, we need to give access to number 3 and number 8. We do that by passing in the props right here. Okay, we go into number 8. And we say number 9, create state variable to keep track of what's typed in. Then we say this is a function. We don't care about functions. We haven't asked it to run yet. We come down here, we have another function. We haven't asked that to run yet. So we say number 10, render form with input and button. We're just making that show up. Now that's what it took, 10 steps to just get to the point where when we load this for the first time, this is what shows up. We draw a line there and we say 1 through 10 is all app loading. So let's document that. We're going to say numbers 1 through 10 is controlling the initial page load. We finding this helpful? We want to continue? We want to just let this settle? Okay. So now we've got to say, what's the next user action? I'm going to say numbers 11 through I don't know yet are going to control user typing in and sending message. And then I'm going to say, I don't know what's after that, but I do know it's going to say display new user message. Those are our 3 steps, right? We load the app, we type something in and hit the send button, and then that's got to show up somewhere. Okay, so user types in the message. Where do they do that? That goes back to our message input, and we've got an on change here. So we're going to say number 11, take the user inputted text and store it in state. What do we mean store it in state? Set message text is coming from number 9 to keep that information in state. This is not the order we developed it. Keep in mind, this is the order that the computer reads all this code. Okay, so number 11, the user typed things in. Number 12, user clicks button or hits enter to submit the form. Okay, where's our form submitted? That's up here. So we say number 12, prevent form from refreshing page. Number 13 is make a copy of the messages coming in from the app state props, so we can push to it. And then I'm going to just make a side note here. We cannot modify messages directly because state variables are immutable. Instead, we have to use the set function. We can't just say messages.push and call it a day. What we really need to do is make a copy of the messages. Then we can add in our message that we want. And then we can say number 14, add in current message text based off of input value from state. We're using message text. That's coming from our message text here. That's what got updated down here in number 11. So we're taking our work from number 11 and using it in 14 to make our new message. Includes timestamp and message type, right? Sent or received. Okay, now 15. Clear message input. And finally, 16, use updated array that now includes a message that was sent and set it into state. We take the work that we did here, we added our message in, and now we take that and set that back into state. Where does that go? That comes back up to app, and we say, that was 16. So I'm going to say that takes us all the way up to 16. Now we've got to do the work to show that message. So we come up to 17 and we say 17, set messages runs from step number 16 and updates array. That's our set messages that we passed in through the prop and then used in the message input. From here, we say number 18, messages has now been updated. We need to revisit this component. So we go into the messages list, and in here, cannot remember a number to save my life. We say number 19, messages now has a new one to display. So we need to loop over them again. Then we come down here and say number 20. Determine if new message is sent or received. Render the component. And I'm just going to do a ... here because we just follow that all the way through, right? Show the received component, show the sent message component, finish it up that way. So I'm going to go back to my app and I'm going to say 17 through 20 ... is display new user message. That's it, guys. 2 days of coding. Look at everything we built. You thought tonight was going to be easy, didn't you?
We never think that when we're in your class.
All right, let's get some terms and maybe optimistically get out of here. Like, I don't know, maybe just 5 or 10 minutes early. It could happen in theory, right? Right? All right, let me pull up the outline. Was I sharing my screen through all of that?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't remember stopping it. And I was like, oh my God, what if they thought I was okay? Not crazy yet. Outline. And this was all relatively captured in our outline. So if you're wondering how those steps break down, that's kind of what we did, everything we did tonight. Hit me with some terms.
The one that I have is object reconstructing.
Object destructuring.
Oh, destructuring. I wrote it wrong. Thank you.
Pulling apart an object by using its keys.
You're not sharing your screen now.
You can also use destructuring on arrays. FYI. What else? I know I said it at the beginning of class. I'm going to say it again. Tuesday's class, when we get back, we will go over both the New York Times assignment and the to-do list assignment. So if you guys are really stuck on them, don't panic. We will be spending more time in class on both of those, just to make sure that you've got the level of understanding, because they're tough assignments, but they're really good assignments for practice and understanding.
To locale string.
Date .to locale string converts a date object into a human friendly format. You didn't believe me when I said you learned all your React concepts in the first 2 days, and the rest of it's just practice. Here we're at, only 2 new terms tonight. All right, well, that's it. You guys have had enough of me. Just back for a week, and then we're gone again on break. We are out for, we have class canceled on Monday because the New Year's holiday is on Sunday, so it's observed on Monday. So you will not see me until Tuesday the 3rd. Until then, practice, practice, practice. Message me if you would like one-on-ones next week, and we can help you on either homework assignment or on this. I will post a copy of this code in addition to the recording, obviously, from tonight. Have a great one, everyone. Happy holidays, whatever holiday you celebrate. I will see
Happy
you.
holidays, guys.